Jane, and thanks for inviting me. I'm delighted to be back in Galway. I'm looking forward to getting to 10 times of being here, but I love every trip, so it's great to see people. Okay. There's my Twitter handle, as they say. Start off with acknowledgements. Two key collaborators in this work, Robert West and Jamie Brown from UCL, and key funders. Okay, so I'm really interested in behaviour change, and smartphone apps and digital interventions in general are presenting huge opportunities, both for advancing our understanding about behaviour change, but also for helping to actually support behaviour change in an applied way. So some of the ways in which it's helpful is that they allow interventions and also measurement in real time and real contexts. So it's been very frustrating over the last few decades, for those of us who are old, to have had to collect data by questionnaires and trying to understand behaviour change by comparing groups cross-sectionally, which really isn't going to give the kind of understanding we need. But now we can really measure, as we've heard earlier today, actual real behaviours in real time and context. Interventions can be tailored to the individual setting and the setting and the moment. They can be interactive and adaptive, engaging and rewarding, hopefully. Obviously there's great variation, like with everything. And as I said, can generate large amounts of data. So it's possible to have continuous and rapid cycles of testing and adaptation of the tools themselves. Here's a couple that we've developed at UCL. Smoke-free 28 on the left and drink less on the right. And the clues are in the titles. And I'll say a little bit more about drink less later on. So there are thousands of apps, just like we heard about the wearable, huge numbers. So I've already said this issue about the importance of behaviour being in the moment, that apps can be with you the whole time, where and when you need them, and a whole range of different kinds of techniques can be included in them. People can be in control, whether they want notifications, how they use it, when they use it. They can set their own goals, tailor their own support. And often we're not aware of what influences our behaviour, but apps can monitor what's going on and detect patterns between our behaviour, our physiology, our movement, also about relationships with other people and the environment, so sensors in the environment. So the promise of being able to really get data about how our behaviour relates to what's going on inside ourselves and also what's going on outside of ourselves is huge. Everybody's different, and apps can, and I think this is going to be a really exciting area, apps can use machine learning to build up a picture of you and how you react to circumstances. So we heard earlier about big data and continuous learning environments in terms of health service systems, but this is where one can have continuous learning about oneself in relation to one's environment and how one goes about things and how one can change. So fantastic potential. So in summary, capture contextualized health-related behaviour in real time. So even an app can, on the phone, can pick up so many different types of data. As I said, can adapt and personalise, and the whole precision medicine and personalisation is really becoming very prominent across the board, and very important that we make sure that this type of intervention is centrally involved. As I said, potential to integrate a broad variety of personal and public data to understand behaviour, low cost and high reach across. There was quite a concern early on about the digital divide, but as obviously smartphones are becoming much more used, then the problems of socioeconomic differences are getting less. So we have huge potential to both understand and change behaviour. However, pitfalls. People get easily bored. And there's a huge problem about how can we keep people engaged in using apps. Huge numbers get downloaded, but they often aren't used over a long time. And we heard David say, this morning, very important point. It's one thing to bring about initial change, but if that's going to translate into health outcomes, then that change has to be maintained. So we really need to be investigating how to make apps engaging and rewarding enough to sustain use. And it's only an app, and actually the way we have evolved means that actually the things that are most rewarding for most of us, can't talk about everyone, are people. I think there's a big potential in thinking about sort of digital human hybrids and how digital technologies can work with personal support from people, whether it's buddies in terms of peer networks or professionals. So I think there's, that's a whole area of research that I think has got great potential. The other issue is so much data and how will it be used. Lucy Yardley, who's Professor of Health Psychology at Southampton, that Leanne Morrison we're hearing from later worked with, was PI on a EPSRC project that I was a co-investigator on with her called You Behave. And that was a methodological problem to try and think about, we're getting so much data even just from phones, how do we really make use of that data to help? And it was a collaboration with behavioural and computer scientists. So I think we need much more of that kind of methodological work. And then there's a whole other area of the issue about privacy and surveillance and people being distrusting of how much data you give away, how your data is used. And obviously these kind of approaches are only as good as the data that are given and received. Also, as has been said earlier, that very early days, and there's actually very little evidence about what works, about what's in these apps, and also, as David mentioned too, how they work, what are the mechanisms of action of these. So if apps are to be maximally useful, they actually need to be informed by the science of behaviour change. And the reason that we put on the conference that's now run 2 times that Jane mentioned was that when I set up the Centre for Behaviour Change at UCL about 3 years ago, I was absolutely inundated by people from smart sort of, startup companies, where they had lots of gizmos and technological know-how, but really didn't know what they were doing in terms of actually how do you change behaviour. And obviously I couldn't meet and talk to all these people, so we put the conference on to really bring academia and those who are developing digital interventions together. So one of the issues I think are methodological limitations. I think, David, did you put up the slide of the MRC guidance earlier on? Which was, I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but this was really trying to go beyond evaluations of simple things like drugs, you have a pill or you have a placebo, to much more complex interventions, which are the interventions to change behaviour. And it was a good advance. But it really, the more I kind of thought about it, the more I thought it's not really fit for purpose for digital interventions. And I'll come back to this later, but last year I hosted a workshop, an international workshop funded by the MRC, and actually a committee on which David sits, And we had actually the majority from the state, but we had 40 plus people came together for 2 days to think about what are the challenges for developing and evaluating digital interventions themselves. There's a lot of different issues that really we need a week to go into. And then also myself and Robert West have written this book, bringing a lot of the learnings together. So just to illustrate in relation to apps to reduce excessive alcohol consumption, this work is funded by the NIHR, National Institute of Health Research in the UK. One of the things we did was just look at the apps out there. This work was probably actually done year before last, if it was published in 2015, but identified 662 apps. Now the majority, if you look for apps with alcohol, is to do with entertainment. They're drinking games and things like that. Nothing to do with actually cutting down on alcohol. And then 19% were just monitoring blood alcohol content, probably so people know whether they can drive. Only 13.7% were actually trying to support alcohol reduction. So we looked at a sample of those. So we looked at the free ones plus the 10 most popular paid, just to look and see what the difference was between them. And these were the kind of techniques we found in them. A lot didn't really have, I don't worry, I actually pulled some.
Oh, okay,
yeah, head of the game, I don't know whose that is. Didn't have any very explicit techniques, but these are the kind of ones we were able to identify. However, only 16% mentioned evidence at all. So the great majority had no evaluation results reported. Theory, that we heard about earlier, none of them mentioned. One issue was that evidence was associated with, or mention of evidence was associated with popularity, so that's good. It's not going to put people off. We also found facilitating social support was associated with the popularity of the app. So we do need popularity for the engagement, but also we need proof that it works. So the kind of things that I think we need to do is draw on frameworks to understand behaviour change, use systematic methods for selecting behaviour change techniques, as we have heard earlier today, and then plan evaluations right at the beginning and ensure we're accumulating evidence within an evaluation plan. Because really it makes you weep in a way, the amount of data that's being collected which isn't actually feeding back into helping us understand either whether the app works and how it works, or indeed about behaviour and behaviour change. Okay, so I'm just going to say a couple of things about this. Started as an internet intervention and has become an app in relation to smoking. The first thing to say here is that this was an RCT carried out over 3 years, and at the end of the 3 years, and you can see from this, I'm showing you the screenshots, hopelessly out of date. You know, this, believe it or not, looked pretty cool at one point. So this is a real problem. Somebody mentioned it earlier, and if we get enough time to discuss this, I think we've really got to get on to much more agile sort of A/B testing, as they do in industry, rather than be starting off with RCTs. Anyway, I'm going to show that this was effective for our target population, and it's actually been taken up by Public Health England and developed as something they call Quick Coach. Now here's another problem is, okay, so we found that this was effective for our target group. Public Health England says great, takes it over, but they want to rebrand it. Often organisations, if they're commercial or whatever, want to rebrand it. They want to update it. They want to tinker with it. And is what they now have the same as what we evaluated? Don't know. So this is why I think one's got to have a continual cycle of evaluating as one collects data. Okay, so this was mainly aimed at people low socioeconomic status. So we had it powered sufficiently that we could look at both separately. And I mean, this is just showing you some numbers that you probably can't see, but just to give you some data to show that this was effective for those with low SES but not high. And we've done all our usability testing and sort of co-design with people from low SES backgrounds. So I'm starting off by saying that this was effective and then say something about how we developed it. So we developed on the basis of evidence, looking at reviews about what we knew, principles of website design with designers within the study team. And I think it's really important to find good designers and app developers who are really committed to the project and one can work carefully with, because I know a lot of projects that have really stumbled by not having that good collaboration. So really, I mean, multidisciplinary working is a great phrase, but when it comes to working, behavioural scientists with app developers or computer scientists, you really have to learn about very different ways of thinking and working for that partnership to work. Person-centred approach and usability testing, and Leanne's going to be saying more about that later. And then theoretical principles, and we use prime theory of motivation, which Robert West has developed, and I shall just quickly give a ridiculously simplistic characterization of it. The idea is, if one has plans, so most apps to change behaviour will have some kind of goal, some kind of plan. That is not going to change behaviour unless it translates into underlying beliefs. You have strong beliefs that support it about things being good or bad, the consequences, the process, etc. These beliefs on their own are not going to change behaviour unless they translate into the more feelings, the wanting good things, the needing to avoid bad things. And all of this has to then translate into the kind of struggle between inhibitions and impulses. So always remembering that behaviour is in the moment at any one time. One's thinking, shall I do this? Shall I do that? So we're not, people who just have a fixed plan in our head and then the plan gets enacted at the right time. It's much more complicated than this. And this is just to do with motivation. And then one has to also think about skills and knowledge and basic capabilities and the opportunities that people make themselves. So in terms of the content, we had a sort of automated advisor to help smokers stop using a very structured quick plan, ready source of information. And we had 33 evidence and all theory-based behaviour change techniques within there. Email reminders and texts, helping them in stressful and social situations. So really trying to intervene at the risky situations for relapse. And in the development paper, which I'll show you shortly, we've got a big table for every single BCT, behaviour change technique. We've put the principle, how that translates into the intervention content, and how it translates into the website design. So we really tried to get these three things working together. So here's just one example out of the 33. This was about constructing a personal rule that generates a strong resolve and strengthening ex-smoker identity. So that was our principle, our behaviour change technique. That went into this motto of not a puff no matter what, and an image to support that. And then the image was obviously attractive, the motto is simple and kind of interactive. And it was published in Translational Behavioural Medicine, if anybody wants to see that table. And actually at the time, I remember Robert West, who's co-PI on this, said nobody's going to be interested in a paper about the development of this. The only thing people are interested in is about the effectiveness. And that was just a few years ago when it was much less common. But I'm really pleased to say that not only did I persevere and get this published, but also much more people are publishing development work. It's absolutely key to be able to share how we went about doing this sort of thing. Okay, so now on to drink less, and this is sort of the RCTs going on currently, and David Crane, Claire Garnett are two PhD students working with Robert, Jamie and me. David Crane, for his masters, did a smoking app, and he's a web developer himself, app developer himself, and he got the right title and knew all the ways of getting it uploaded up the hierarchy when you search for it very quickly. And he has 300,000 people a day download his app, which is fantastic. So as soon as one can get a really well-used app, you then have a platform for being able to just do lots and lots of experiments by changing different modules within it. And what I'm going to present here, unlike the last one, is we set out with discrete modules, and we're testing those modules within the overall intervention. And I think where we have to go, and I'm so pleased to hear earlier about the open source sharing platform, we absolutely have to go to a place where we're going to have platforms of modules that we can share with each other. I mean, it really doesn't make sense that, thousands or tens of thousands of us are all developing things that are actually trying to do often quite similar things. And then, we don't have the learning and the sharing that we could. So that's one of a long-term mission, and one that I really hope others will support and get going. Easier said than done, but I do think we need to go in that direction. So we've got, I'll show you the modules later. We've got one that everybody has, and then 5 that is randomised, randomised. We identified them from Cochrane reviews. We're just updating, there's one in 2007, and we're just updating one now, which we publish later this year, of digital interventions for alcohol reduction. We analysed the techniques in the popular alcohol reduction apps, and then we also had expert consensus work of behavioural experts, but also alcohol experts internationally, to identify what they thought would be the most likely behaviour change techniques based on clinical experience, based on their academic knowledge. And then the usability work we did 2 studies, one on first impressions, because obviously if you don't have a good first impression and suck people in, nothing else follows. But also we did one after 2 weeks, so that the lived experience of using the app. And again, this is absolutely key given what I said earlier about the huge percentage of people who just don't even last 2 weeks with an app. And different things tend to come out. So it's structured around setting a goal, so everybody does that, that's fixed. And then the 5 intervention modules are self-monitoring and feedback that work very iteratively with goals, action planning, normative feedback, cognitive bias retraining, and identity change. Those are the 5 modules that get randomised. So we have a full factorial study design, which means there are 32 conditions. So each of those 5 modules has 2 versions, an intensive one where we throw everything at it, and then a sort of minimally credible, because that's the thing, you have to have something that is credible, otherwise you haven't got a proper comparison. And actually I've had a couple of people email me saying, I've been disappointed that it's not done this, that or the other, and actually it is doing this, that, the other. It's just that they haven't got that condition in the trial. So that's an interesting one. We've had to craft an email back to people to kind of explain why, but not in a way that's going to put them off carrying on with it. And that's something we didn't think about at the beginning. And again, the email we've crafted, that's the sort of thing that would be useful to share. So what we'll have is a knowledge about whether the app works in general, but also the extent to which these modules will. And there's a very good methodological approach by Linda Collins and her colleagues, which we can then use to keep a sort of optimization cycle going. Okay, this is who we're looking for. 672 participants who are hazardous and harmful drinkers on this audit, a short questionnaire that's in the actually in the app. Primary outcome is change in past week consumption over the last week, 1 month after starting it, so quite short-term outcomes. These are other, in view of time I won't go through all of this. Right, really important, we're recruiting now. So it unfortunately only available on the iPhone because of the grant restrictions. But obviously, if it's effective and we get more money to carry on with this, we'll get it on the other more popular platform. So anybody who wants more information about this, presumably the slides will be circulated or something. But anyway, please do help with that. So conclusions, huge potential, however, only realised if it's informed by the science of behaviour change, the evidence, the theories, the methods, and that we use all this activity and translate it into knowledge by using experimental designs and the cross-disciplinary collaboration, again, that we heard about later. So coming back to the 5 papers that are coming out, hopefully the next month or so, in American Journal of Preventive Medicine, each one tackling a slightly different aspect. So the first is about this issue about rapid rate of technological development and that interventions are outdated before the evaluation's finished, and what do we do about that? Problems of sustained engagement with new technology, how to test theories of real-time behaviour change with these data. I was most involved in this third one because I think huge potential, but how do we actually go about doing it? What are the best methods for evaluating effectiveness? So what is the control condition we use in this? What is the question we're actually addressing? And then also cost effectiveness. If this is the book I mentioned, but I'm going to go on to the next one, which and this is lots of advertising here. So this is the conference for next year. It's 22nd and 23rd of February. It's the third year we'll have done it, and we had over 300 at the last couple. So yeah, a good 2-day conference. Summer school, and this is the UCL Centre for Behaviour Change. So if anybody's interested in the monograph that I mentioned, or in any of the other things that we're doing, do sign up for it, and you can just be emailed about our activities. And this is a summer school this summer. And final bit of advertising I promised I'd say is that we're starting a new interdisciplinary MSc in behaviour change, and digital will be part of that. So I hope that gives enough time for some questions. Thank you.